Hi guys, today I'm going to give you my thoughts on the Canonet QL17. Now this is a rangefinder camera made in the 1970s and it has shutter priority mode, which means you can adjust the shutter and it automatically selects the aperture for you, which is very useful if you're kind of a beginner photographer and you're not fully versed to full manual mode, which incidentally this also does have. It can work totally independently without a battery, but of course it needs a battery for the light meter. Now this camera has a bunch of good points and bad points. So let's take these issues one step at a time. The first thing I want to talk to you about is the lens itself. It's a 40mm f1.7 lens. It has a shutter built into the lens itself, which means it can sync at any shutter speed from 1/4 of a second right through to 5/100th of a second. So if you're a bit of a strobist, this is actually very cool. As you can see, the lens itself has pentagon-shaped aperture blades, which means if you were to open it up and take a picture of specular highlights in the background, the bokeh balls would be pentagonal rather than circular, which is pretty cool. It gives this lens a little bit of character. I don't have any problems with this lens at all. This lens is actually incredibly sharp, really high resolution, and even though a lot of the time older lenses are quite prone to flare, the flare has been reasonably well controlled from what I have experienced so far. Inside the camera, you have this really ingenious quick load system, and this is why it's called the Canon QL17. QL for quick load. You just literally put the film in here, the leader just goes behind here, you close it, and that's it. You just shut it like that, and that's it. That's how you load the film. It's incredibly easy, and it's very practical. So up top, you've got your film advance lever, you've got a frame counter here, you've got a hot shoe, which I find is incredibly useful. I've only used it a couple of times though, with good results, I might add. You've got your shutter speed dial here, you've got your ISO, or as they call it, the ASA, which is the same thing. So the ISO dial is here, and you adjust it by using this thing that's incredibly hard to turn, and if you don't have nails, you know, it's a little bit painful sometimes, but anyway, that's the ISO dial. You got your aperture dial here. Oftentimes I just leave it on A, which is automatic mode, so this way it just automatically gets your sorts out your shutter for you, and all you do is you adjust the shutter speed here like so, and it does it all automatically. It's pretty cool. You've also got these blue numbers here, 14, 20, and 28. Now, this is for when you have a Canon flash, where 14 is your lowest power and 28 is your highest power. This is what I think it is. I actually truly don't understand this kind of old school system of flashes. But anyway, it's there if you want to use an old school flash. What else do you have? If you put it down here on this side of the thing, it turns into manual mode. So here we've got 125th of a second at f2.8. And the thing is, in manual mode, it doesn't use the light meter at all. So what I generally tend to do if I ever use it on manual mode is I get a light meter reading like this, and it tells me, okay, at 125th of a second, it's going to be whatever aperture. And then I'm like, okay, well, if I want to brighten it, darken it, or whatever, I will, you know, put it on, like, I don't know, f2.8, and then adjust this as necessary. Basically, I use the auto mode to give me a rough light meter reading, and then I go into the manual mode to actually fine-tune it how I like it. So at least it has that option. It's slightly more cumbersome than, say, for example, a Nikon SLR, but it is what it is. It works, and it's all good. Over on this side, you've got the self-timer mechanism and the focusing tab. It's got quite a short throw. I've found it accurate. No problems with that at all. It's quite nice to use. There's a cool dude on YouTube, actually, that recently did a thing with this, a review. I forget what his name is. Eduardo something or other. Anyway, he didn't really like this, but personally, I've never had a problem focusing with this, so actually, I quite like that feature. Here, it shows you your focus range, where the line tells you basically where you're focusing. Your infinity over here, and then 0.8 meters. So 0.8 meters isn't massively close, but, you know, it's not a big lens. If you wanted it closer, obviously the lens would have to extend outwards. So I can forgive that. It's pretty good. But what you can't do is you can't do zone focusing unless you have some kind of like written guide or something like that with you. Some cameras are really good at zone focusing. This isn't one of them, although let's face it, if you stuck it on f16 and you had it like this, most things will be in focus anyway, so that's not really a massive problem. Besides, you have a rangefinder, so you don't really need to zone focus in the first place. One thing I quite like is the fact that the light meter thingy bob is right here. So if you put a filter on top of the lens, the light meter obviously automatically takes that into account. It's not through the lens, but it's as near as through the lens as you're going to get. And that's really cool. Okay, here we've just got an internal view of the viewfinder. You can see the frame lines there. And on the side you have the aperture needle. And as you move the shutter speed dial, the aperture needle moves about, and that's basically how you can tell what aperture it is. On to focusing, it's a rangefinder, so you have this double image thing. You can see that lens is, you got that double image, and then the image lines up and it's in focus. It's not hard to get used to at all. The final really good point I want to make about this camera is that it looks really nice. It's just so quintessentially 1970s. It really harks back to that era. And also the build quality is really cool. Let's face it, as photographers, aesthetics is actually really important to us. We take pictures because they look nice, you know? And as an object, as just a nice object to have, I think this hits the mark really well. Now on to the bad points, and unfortunately there's quite a few of them. So my first gripe is the shutter speed. Fastest shutter speed is 1/500th of a second, which is great if you use slow speed film. Not so great if you want to use your camera indoors and outdoors and you don't want to use a flash. Now, of course, yes, you can use filters, but that's just another thing to carry around with you. So, unfortunately, it's something I do not like, the 500th of a second. If it went at least up to 1,000th of a second, that would have been a little bit better. The second problem is the aperture. It only goes to f16. Now, I could almost forgive this because it opens up to f1.7, which is really good, but f16 is a little bit limiting. If I had, say, ISO 800 film in there, I want that to be down to f22 because, of course, the shutter speed only goes to 500th of a second. So if it's a sunny day, you cannot use what I would call fast indoor film. Things like the ISO 800s and the 1600s, you can't use those unless you use a filter. Another thing I don't like is to do with the automation of the camera. When you have it on auto mode and the camera decides it's too bright or too dark, it actually stops you from taking that picture, which has caught me out a couple of times, especially when it was new. And it leads to a very frustrating experience, actually, because you think, you know, it's about right. And then suddenly it won't take a picture. And actually this led to this hilarious picture where I was fiddling around thinking I had a broken camera. Of course it wasn't broken at all. I just needed to put it on manual mode. And finally, and this is the big one, the haptics. Oftentimes when I have a camera, sometimes I want to be in the shot myself, or I want a friend to take a picture of me. And what I do is I hand the camera over to the friend and show them how to use it. And every single time I've done that, what they've done is they've advanced the shutter. And it's left a really disappointing feeling for everyone that has used it. The haptics are they're just hopeless. If you ever use a really nice camera, something with really good haptics, something like an Olympus Pen F or a Pentax K1000, when you advance the lever and you press the button, it's just a really nice sensation. This feels like it's broken. It isn't broken, but it kind of feels like it is. And the other thing, this shutter shutter button, it's really spongy and springy and nasty. And that totally ruins the entire experience for me. And it's because of this that I would not actually recommend this camera to anyone. Actually, I would. I mean, it's not a bad camera. It's very good optically. It's good. It produces very nice, very sharp images. It's compact enough. You can put it in your pocket. I have taken some nice shots with this camera, and I've taken it places where my Nikon SLR, would have been turned away because it's a big, bulky camera, and I was able to get this shot, which it means a lot to me, So yeah, it's a useful camera, but I have to say it's not been a pleasurable experience. And I mean, I've had this for 2 years, and I maybe put like 5 or 6 rolls through it, and that tells you everything. Something like my Nikon FM2, which is my favorite camera, I've put so many rolls through that thing. This one is like you put a roll through, it's like, thank God I'm finished with that, and then you take it away, and then you just put it on the shelf, and you forget about the camera for a little while. And it sits on the shelf because it looks nice, but it very, very rarely gets used. So to sum up this camera, I have to say, number one, the build is very good. Number two, the optics, the lens is very good. Number three, the shutter speed is a little bit limited, as is the range of apertures that you have, but it is nice to have the f1.7. It's good to have the lens, the light meter right here, that's good. The focusing system, the throw is short and pretty good. The rangefinder system is good. The shutter is it's really poor. The automatic setting, it's okay, but I don't really like it sometimes, especially when it's low light. The automation is good because, you can just leave it on shutter priority and you can just go out, shoot. It's nice and easy, but at the same time, it stops you taking pictures sometimes. And finally, the actual user experience, the haptic feedback, as I call it, I really don't like it. And for that reason alone, I would not recommend this camera for some people. And that's it really. I'll leave you with a few images now so you can get an idea of the type of images that I've made. And I know they're not the best images, but it is the type of photography that I do. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.